baby is born, one could say they come with a message for us, actually to remind us of the stages that we as a humanity as a whole have been going through, and that have to complete. For instance, we find that when the baby is born, the baby is still not conscious, and the stages of consciousness could be seen as the opening up of the senses. So practically until adolescence, we can say that the child is not conscious, and you can see this in many children, with that they're not acutely aware of their surrounding yet, and then more or less in the stage of adolescence, we find that the opening of the full opening of the senses, actually, or one could say at reaching a high point, which is when the ego is born, which is the self, the ich, which is also the birth of the stage where the being is completely disconnected from those early beginnings. We find that a child is when the child is in the womb of the mother, and where there is no separateness between mother and child, and there's this Euroboric wholeness. And we find the same thing back in the first stages of humanity, where we were in the beginning in this indigenous state of the paradise, and we were unconscious and naked, didn't know that we were naked, which symbolizes that we were not, the senses were not open yet. And with the birth of the ego, we find that the senses are open, and we find then the disconnection from that original oneness, where we were still one with nature. And in terms of humanity as a whole, you could say that we are stuck in that stage of adolescence, where we are totally, where the senses have been completely opened, but we have disconnected from nature. And technology can be more or less seen as the replacement of nature in this stage. The point is that whilst we have to go beyond this stage of the senses, which is the stage towards self-consciousness, from consciousness to self-consciousness, which is going inwards, among others by realizing that the senses are basically feeding us an illusion of separateness. Yet this stage is extremely important in order for the next stage to take place, to be able to occur, which is the stage towards self-awareness. And the purpose of my vlog today is because it is extremely important that we realize that the ego is extremely necessary, and thus also this necessary evil of this becoming completely caught in the senses, in this world of sensing and responding to what we sense, which is actually what I called in the prior vlog a mental prison. The idea is that we need the ego, but that we shouldn't get caught in that stage, which is the stage of duality and the taking apart of the opposites, among others of the observer and the observed. It's extremely important because many traditions, spiritual traditions, what they actually are trying to sell to us is actually an abortion of the ego, and a kind of a regression towards the amniotic or Euroboric beginnings, which is back to the paradise, but back to wholeness, but without the self-consciousness, which is actually the purpose of the whole cycle. This is very important, because without the ego, without this stage of the mental prison, as it were, we cannot move on to self-consciousness. So we need consciousness, which is the opening of the senses, in order to reach the self-consciousness. But without the consciousness, without the ego, without the particle, without the detached, without falling under the illusion that what we are looking at is separate to us, including God. The idea that God is something out there is a logical consequence of this sense of the separateness. Yet, without that separation, there could be no self-awareness. And most New Age traditions and most religious traditions actually, in my conception, unconsciously, are preaching to us the death and the murder of the ego, which would constitute a regression back to the Euroboric beginnings. But the way forward towards the paradise is that we need the ego, but the ego then needs to turn inwards and stop being caught in the mire, in the illusion of the senses. So it's a very subtle stage where we become aware that the senses entrap us into these different layers of illusions, including perception. Yet it does provide a kind of a mirror structure for us to become conscious, and the idea would be that we needed to fall, we opted out of the paradise in order to become self-conscious. As in the beginning, Adam and Eve didn't know that they were naked, and then they became aware that they were naked, symbolizing the first beginnings of the senses. And then after consciousness comes self-consciousness. So we need to transcend the ego, but not kill it, because killing it would mean an abortion of the whole process of becoming self-conscious. And the purpose of the whole journey would be that we would, at the end of it, return to our elders, the indigenous peoples, but with the yield, as it were, which is self-awareness. And this is very important, because the planet has gotten stuck in the adolescent stage, where we are stuck in the senses, in awareness, and so stuck in the material, the illusion of materialism, and amassing and developing that stage, and somehow having been entrapped there. But now we need to move on and turn inwards and realize that we need to become aware of ourselves, that is the forbidden fruit, and that it's not random that we didn't fall out of these indigenous beginnings, but we chose to fall in order to become conscious. And that at a deeper level, it's almost as if God wanted to become conscious of himself, herself, which is happening through us.